Hey guys, how's it going? Master Cow here, and today I'm going to be doing the 8th video for my 2021 off-season recap series, the Carolina Panthers. So the Panthers, in Matt Rule's first year, had a pretty good season from an offensive perspective. Defense was a work in progress. Unfortunately for them, they lost a lot of close games, which on the one hand, it's good news that they were competitive in a lot of games. They weren't a rollover and play dead kind of a team, but that's more wins that could have been on the table, and so the Panthers decided to make a move at what they think is an upgrade at quarterback. We'll see how that pans out for them in the next year or two. So the Panthers did not have any notable coaching changes this offseason, as coordinators Phil Snow and Joe Brady return as defensive and offensive coordinators respectively. Brady did receive a lot of head coaching interviews this cycle. He interviewed, I know, for the Jets job. I think he interviewed for the Falcons job as well. I want to say he interviewed for at least 4 of them. I think he interviewed for the Eagles as well. Ultimately, though, those teams elected to go in different directions, and Brady will be back for a second year as offensive coordinator. And if the Panthers have another good year offensively, you can imagine that he'll be another hot name next cycle. So next we go into the free agents that they retained. The Panthers wound up using the franchise tag on starting right tackle Taylor Moton, a second-round pick in 2017. The tag is worth $13.754 million, which is fully guaranteed. Moton's been pretty dependable for them on the right side of the offensive line, and as we'll get to later, he's going to be one of only a few guaranteed returning starters. And the Panthers have until the 15th of this month to reach a long-term deal with him. Otherwise, he must play out the year on the tag. And there is interest in an extension. We'll see if they're able to reach one. Restricted free agent tackle Trent Scott was brought back on a 1-year deal worth $1.65 million with $730,000 guaranteed. Scott was a waiver claim at final cuts from the Chargers, and he wound up starting 4 games for the Panthers last year. He started 9 games for LA last season because of injuries on their offensive line. And he's a pretty solid swing tackle with, again, starting experience there. Long snapper Jeffrey Jansen was brought back on a 1-year deal worth $1.2125 million with nothing guaranteed. So a minimum salary for a guy that's been there for a while. Starting right guard John Miller was brought back on a 1-year deal worth $1.1275 million, $137,500 guaranteed. Miller started, I think, almost every game, if not every game, at right guard for them last year, and he was actually fairly solid for them, and this will wind up actually being a pay cut as he had made like $3 million last year. So he may have to end up fending off someone to retain the starting job. So we'll have to see what their plan is for him this next season. Linebacker Julian Stanford was re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $1.075 million. He's a key special teamer. Restricted free agent receiver Brandon Zylstra was brought back on a 1-year deal worth $920,000. Kicker Joey Sly was brought back as an exclusive rights free agent, 1 year, $850,000. Receiver Keith Kirkwood, who was injured for a lot of last year, was brought back on a 1-year deal worth $780,000 as a restricted free agent. And exclusive rights free agent tight end Colin Thompson was re-signed to a 1-year deal worth $780,000. Now on to their free agent signings. The Panthers didn't spend a lot of big money in free agency. Instead, they spent money on a variety of different free agents at different roles, but for pretty good prices. They signed guard Pat Elflein to a 3-year deal worth $13.5 million, $6 million of it is guaranteed. Elflein spent last year between the Vikings and the New York Jets after a waiver claim. Elflein's been mostly a disappointment in the NFL. He dealt with some injuries, and he was never really able to fully establish himself as the starter in Minnesota, hence why he got cut mid-season. He actually did pretty solid down the stretch with the Jets after he was claimed, and we'll see if he can have a chance to establish himself now in Carolina. They signed offensive lineman Cam Irving to a 2-year deal worth $10 million. $8 million of it is guaranteed. Irving's kind of played all around the offensive line since he was made a first-round pick by the Cleveland Browns back in 2015. Hasn't really lived up to that due to the fact that the Panthers are now his fourth team in 7 seasons, and also that he's played up and down the offensive line. The Panthers will give him a shot to be their starting left tackle. He spent last year with the Dallas Cowboys, but he was injured for a lot of the season. Defensive tackle Morgan Fox, former LA Ram, was signed to a 2-year deal worth $8.1 million with $5.035 million guaranteed. Cornerback A.J. Bouye was signed to a 2-year deal worth $7 million, $3.5 million of it guaranteed. Bouye had been released this offseason by the Broncos, as he had a disappointing year after he was acquired from the Jacksonville Jaguars in a trade. Bouye missed some time due to injury and wasn't very effective when he was on the field. And on top of that, he got hit with a suspension at the end of the year, and he still has to serve out 2 games of that suspension for this upcoming season, so he won't be available for the Panthers until Week 3. Tight end Dan Arnold, former Cardinal and Saint, was signed to a 2-year deal worth $6 million, $4.5 million guaranteed. There was a lot of hype on Arnold last year as people thought that he'd break out well with the Cardinals, but that did not happen, unfortunately, and so he'll have to hope that he can break out in Carolina this time around. Former Chargers linebacker Denzel Perryman was signed to a 2-year deal worth $6 million, just under $3 million of it is guaranteed. Perryman was a part-time player for the Chargers last year, as the former second-round pick has dealt with a lot of injuries in his time in the league. Edge rusher Hassan Reddick was signed to a 1-year deal worth $6 million, and that's fully guaranteed. Former first-round pick of the Cardinals was written off as a bust before the start of last season, and then he had a breakout year as he was made a full-time edge rusher. Prior to that, he'd split time as being a middle linebacker and an edge rusher, but he posted, I think, like 12.5 sacks last year, so easily the best season of his career, and despite that, he had to settle for a 1-year deal, and he gets to reunite with Rule, who he played under when he was at Temple. Wide receiver David Moore, former Seattle Seahawks, signed a 2-year deal worth $4.75 million, $1.25 million guaranteed. He's been a nice complimentary piece for Seattle the past few years, and he'll add some depth to the receiving core. Former Titans defensive tackle Daquan Jones signed a 1-year deal worth $4.05 million, and it's fully guaranteed. Edge rusher Frankie Louvu signed a 1-year deal worth $1.1 million with $180,000 guaranteed. The New York Jets had non-tendered him as a restricted free agent. He's shown some flashes as a rotational pass rusher and can also help on special teams. Veteran corner Rashawn Melvin signed a 1-year deal worth $1.075 million, nothing guaranteed. Melvin was released by the Jacksonville Jaguars this offseason, and he had opted out of the 2020 season. Another former Jaguar, Karan Reed, signed a 1-year deal worth $1.075 million. He's bounced around the league a whole lot the past few seasons. Safety Delano Hill, former third-round pick of the Seahawks, signed a 1-year deal worth $990,000. Defensive end Frank Heron signed a 1-year deal worth $850,000. Defensive end Kendall Donnerson signed a 1-year deal worth $780,000. But he has since been cut. Offensive lineman Martez Ivy signed a 1-year deal worth $660,000. Cornerback Jalen Julius, 1 year, $660,000. Fullback Mikey Daniel, 1 year, $660,000. And defensive tackle P.J. Johnson, 1 year, $660,000. But Johnson has also since been cut. Speaking of cuts, they had a number of cuts this year, and the Panthers have a total of $45 million in dead money from that, plus some other moves that we'll get to later on. So K'Wan Short has been with the team since 2012, was released. Short has dealt with injuries in both of the past 2 seasons and had a large cap hit, so the Panthers elected to move on. He remains unsigned as of this point, however, and the Panthers didn't rule out him maybe coming back at some point. Safety Trey Boston, despite having re-upped with the team on a 3-year deal just last year, gets released 1 year into that. As they're going to let Jeremy Chin, who was the runner-up to Defensive Rookie of the Year behind Washington's Chase Young, to transition from linebacker into safety, which was his college position. Boston also remains unsigned. Edge rusher Stephen Weatherly, who they signed last year in free agency, was cut and signed with the Vikings, his original team. Punter Michael Pilardi, who missed all of last season with a torn ACL, was released and signed with the Dolphins. Defensive tackle Zach Kerr got cut. He signed with the 49ers. Safety Natrell Jamerson, who had been promoted from the practice squad at the end of the year, was waived with a failed physical designation. They cut defensive tackle Woodrow Hamilton. He signed with the Titans. Quarterback Tommy Stevens was cut. And then also linebacker Jordan Mack, who opted out last year, elected to retire. For their free agent departures, their biggest loss is going to be Curtis Samuel, who had the best season of his career as a running back who could also run the ball as well. And he signed a 3-year deal with Washington to reunite with Ron Rivera. Tight end Chris Manhurt signed a 2-year deal with the Jaguars, primarily a blocker. Running back Mike Davis, who had a pretty nice season for the Panthers after the injury to Christian McCaffrey, signed a 2-year deal with the Falcons. Starting left guard Chris Reed signed with the Colts. Cornerback Rasul Douglas, another waiver claim at the start of the season, signed with the Raiders. Guard Michael Schofield signed with the Ravens. Nickelback Corn Elder signed with the Detroit Lions. Center Tyler Larson also signed with Washington. Fullback Alex Armas signed with the Saints. Wide receiver Pharaoh Cooper signed with the Jaguars. And edge rusher F.A. Obata was non-tenured as a restricted free agent, and he signed with the Bills. They have 3 unsigned free agents. Left tackle Russell Okung, who they acquired during the 2020 offseason in a trade with the Chargers. That trade, Russell Okung for Trey Turner, did not work out for either team, as both players struggled with injuries and were not very good when they were healthy. Linebacker Tahir Whitehead and linebacker Darius Taylor also remain unsigned for Carolina. So as far as trades go, the most notable move the Panthers did was acquiring former number 3 overall pick Sam Darnold from the New York Jets. They gave up a 6th rounder in 2021, along with 2nd and 4th round picks in 2022. So we all know how the storyline about Darnold in New York, how just bad GM and bad head coach failed to put the proper infrastructure around him. Atrocious offensive line meant he had to run for his life under pressure, which led to all those turnovers. No running game to take some of the pressure off him. So just, yeah, and Adam Gase, enough said. So I wish Sam Darnold nothing but the best as a Jets fan myself. Not in week 1 of this season, obviously. I'm hoping that we beat the Panthers, but beyond that, I hope that he is able to revive his career in Carolina. Shortly after that, they then sent last year's starter Teddy Bridgewater to the Denver Broncos, and acquiring just a 6th round pick in return, as the Panthers took a massive dead money hit by trading away Bridgewater, which is the main reason why they have close to $50 million in dead money. And the reason why they traded Bridgewater was mostly because he wasn't able to lead the Panthers to a lot of those victories in those one-score games. Bridgewater will be competing with Drew Lock in Denver to compete for the starting role. We'll talk about that in the Broncos video, which will be actually the next one coming up in this series. And the Panthers were able to recoup a 4th rounder in 2022 that they traded to the Jets, as they picked one up from the Houston Texans in a trade made during the draft. That was when the Texans moved up to select Nico Collins, I believe. Speaking of the draft, the Panthers were pretty active on draft day. With their 1st round pick, 8th overall, they took South Carolina cornerback J.C. Horn. His dad, Joe Horn, played for the division rival Saints back in the 80s, so we'll see how J.C. does in the league, and he does fill a good need for them at corner. Next up, the Panthers actually traded back twice in the 2nd round. They traded back with the Bears when they moved up to take Taven Jenkins, and then they traded back again with the Browns when they took J.O.K. And when they finally got to their pick, which was 27th, they took LSU receiver Terrace Marshall Jr., so more reinforcements to that wide receiving core, and a guy who knows the system. He played for Joe Brady on that national championship LSU team, so that's definitely good there. The Panthers would then trade up a bit in the 1st round, and they took BYU tackle Brady Christensen with the 6th pick in the 3rd round. and Christensen is a guy that they will have playing a number of positions, and we'll see what they have for him in the plans, possibly by next season. They added tight end Tommy Tremble with the 19th pick in the 3rd round, and he'll help out with the blocking. Oklahoma State running back Chuba Hubbard with the 21st pick in the 4th round. They also traded back in the 4th round that year. They took Iowa defensive tackle Davion Nixon with the 14th pick in the 5th round. Cornerback Keith Taylor with the 22nd pick in the 5th round. Guard Deontay Brown with the 9th pick in the 6th round. Wide receiver Shi Smith with the 20th pick in the 6th round. Long snapper Thomas Fletcher with the 38th pick in the 6th round. And defensive tackle Phil Hoskins with the 4th pick in the 7th round. Panthers to this point have not signed any players to extensions. Again, from the time I'm recording this video, they have 8 days to reach a new deal with Moton. And the Panthers have also not suffered any injuries that would affect the start of the season. So my overall thoughts on the Panthers offseason. I thought they did a fairly decent job. They are taking a calculated risk that they can revive Sam Darnold's career. They do have a much better coaching than Darnold had in New York. The receiving core looks really, really good. He gets the team back up with Robbie Anderson. You got DJ Moore. You got Marshall. Tight end's kind of a question mark, but you also have one of the best running backs in the game, McCaffrey, who's back from injury as well. So already the infrastructure looks better. Offensive line, we'll get to that. I'm not very high on that offensive line, however. And then they added some more reinforcements to the defense, like Horn and Reddick and whatnot. I think their defense will be a bit better. I guess it depends on how well Horn does as a rookie, but I think there's still more to do for that. So the needs that I listed out for the Panthers, I said quarterback. Yes, that was addressed with Darnold. Again, it is a risk, and the Panthers, by trading for Darnold, passed up on the chance to take one of the first-round rookies like Justin Fields or Mac Jones. So we'll see in a couple of years how that works out for them. And they have 2 years with Darnold as they picked up his fully guaranteed 5th-year option for 2022. I mentioned guard and tackle as needs. For those, they added Elflein, and they brought back Miller, and then they added Irving. I think Elflein is a decent signing. It depends on if he can stay healthy and if he if he plays like the way he did when he was with the Jets at the end of the year, then that's probably not a bad return on investment for $4.5 million per year. So he won't be elite, but he'll be solid at best. How much of an upgrade over Chris Reed, though, I don't really know. I don't really like the Irving signing because he's not proven as a left tackle in any way. He's essentially a first-round bust, and he's probably best suited as a backup. So, yeah. So, overall, their offensive line, I think, will be a bit better than last year's, and it's definitely better than anything Darnold played with the Jets, but I think it'll definitely be like a bottom-half O-line in the league. Receiver, they definitely addressed that with David Moore and also with Terrace Marshall. We'll see how well they can replace Samuel. And then corner, yes, that was definitely addressed with Horn and Bouye. For secondary needs, I listed tight end, defensive line, and linebacker. Tight end was addressed with Dan Arnold, who will be competing with Ian Thomas for the starting role, and then also Tremble for depth. Defensive line, yes, they completely overhauled that. They moved on from 3 guys there in Weatherly, Short, and Kerr, and they brought in 3 new guys, Fox, Jones, and Reddick. And then linebacker, they added Perryman, who's a solid guy when he's healthy. And yeah, so overall, I'm going to have to give the Panthers a B- for their offseason. Again, I think they did a good job addressing some of their needs. I feel like they could have done better at addressing the offensive line. And you got to wonder, could they have been more aggressive, maybe trading up for Penei Sewell once he started to slip a bit in the draft? as he wound up getting taken just one spot ahead of him, number 7 overall by the Lions. And then obviously the coaching will be key as far as fixing Sam Darnold. So with that, here are the projected starters for the Panthers entering training camp. Darnold will start at quarterback. McCaffrey will start at running back. Irving at left tackle. Elflein at left guard. Matt Paradis, who's in a contract year, at center. Miller at right guard. He could possibly get pushed by Christensen or maybe Dennis Daly for a starting job. And the only reason I think that is because of his contract being a minimum salary deal. Moton's a lock at right tackle. Wide receiver will be DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and I guess we'll see who the number 3 is between Moore and Marshall. Usually the advantage would go to the veteran in this case, but Marshall does have experience playing in the system. Tight end will be a true competition between Thomas and Arnold. Defensive line, you'll have Brian Burns off the edge. Derek Brown, and then one of Daquan Jones or Morgan Fox at the middle, and then you'll have Reddick off the other edge, so you got 3 first-round picks up there. Linebacker will be Perryman, Shaq Thompson, and then Jermaine Carter. Cornerback's kind of a bit of going to be a competition, but I think it's going to be Horn, Dante Jackson, and then Troy Pride Jr., with the caveat, obviously, that Bouye was hit with the suspension. And we'll see how it shapes out during camp and who Bouye would theoretically replace once he gets reinstated from the suspension. And then safety will be Justin Burris and then obviously Jeremy Chin. So not a whole lot of core players that the Panthers have. We'll see if they can lock up some of those guys like Moton and maybe DJ Moore to extensions. But they do have some talented young players like Chin and Brown and Burns, and they hope Horn, and then and obviously McCaffrey being a core player as well. Didn't want to forget him. So that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next off-season recap video.